It was a bright and quiet morning in the city. The sun was just rising, spreading a soft golden light over the streets. People were starting their day, cars moving slowly along the roads, and the city seemed calm. Judge Marcus Williams, a well-known federal judge in the area, was driving to his office. He was dressed in a simple suit, carrying his briefcase in the passenger seat. His car was clean and polished, a reflection of the care he took in every part of his life. He liked to be punctual and prepared, and today was no different. As he drove, he was thinking about the cases he had that week. One was particularly important, a civil rights case that had gained attention in the local newspapers. He thought about the families involved, the people who were waiting for justice, and the responsibility he carried. Even though he had been a judge for many years, he never forgot that behind every case there were real lives affected. His mind was focused, and his hands gripped the steering wheel lightly, driving carefully but steadily along the road. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Reed was just finishing his morning patrol. He had been on the force for nearly 10 years. Today he felt annoyed even before his shift began. A few small incidents earlier in the week had left him frustrated, and he carried that irritation as he watched cars pass by. His eyes scanned each car for violations, and his focus quickly narrowed when he noticed a sleek black car moving slightly faster than the speed limit. He tapped his siren, signaling for the car to pull over. The car slowed smoothly and moved to the side of the road. Marcus noticed immediately and complied without hesitation. He always followed traffic rules carefully, and he never wanted any trouble with the law. As he waited, he straightened his tie and adjusted his seatbelt. He had learned that staying calm and respectful during a traffic stop made everything go smoothly. Officer Reed approached the car with a purposeful stride. He had one hand resting on his belt near his radio, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the driver. "License and registration," he said sharply. There was a tension in his voice, an edge that came not from duty, but from irritation and bias he didn't even fully recognize. Marcus handed over the documents politely. His voice was calm and steady, a stark contrast to the officer's sharp tone. "Good morning, officer. Here are my license and registration," he said clearly, his eyes meeting the officer's through the window. There was no fear, no anger, only a quiet confidence. As Officer Reed glanced at the paperwork, his expression began to change. He froze for a moment, his mind racing. The name on the license was Judge Marcus Williams. Suddenly, the small, routine traffic stop was no longer routine at all. The officer realized that the man he had pulled over was not just any driver. He was a highly respected federal judge, someone with authority and influence in the legal world. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Reed's previous assumptions, his irritation, and the bias he carried collided with the reality in front of him. The judge was calm, polite, and composed, showing no signs of fear or frustration despite the situation. Reed felt a sudden rush of panic. He had underestimated this man completely, and he knew instantly that he had crossed a line. Marcus noticed the hesitation in the officer's eyes. He remained silent for a moment, allowing the officer to regain composure. He didn't raise his voice or accuse the officer. He simply waited, confident that the law and respect for others would guide the interaction. He had been in difficult situations before, but this one required patience and careful attention. "Is there a problem, officer?" Marcus asked, his tone polite but firm. There was no anger, no confrontation, just a clear question. Reed cleared his throat, trying to hide his surprise. He wanted to assert control, but he realized quickly that this situation was no longer under his command. The officer took a step back mentally, though he remained standing at the car window physically. He looked at Marcus again, this time noticing the calm authority in his eyes. This man was someone who dealt with difficult people every day and had learned how to maintain composure no matter the situation. Reed felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him, mixed with anxiety about what could happen if he did not handle this correctly. Marcus broke the silence with a small, professional smile. "I understand if you are enforcing traffic rules, officer. I am happy to cooperate fully," he said. His words were measured, showing that he respected the officer's duty while also subtly reminding him of proper behavior. Reed fumbled with his words. Yes. You were going slightly over the limit," he stammered. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by nervousness. The more he looked at the judge, the more he realized how serious his mistake could be. Pulling over a prominent black judge with any hint of bias was dangerous, not just for his career but for the trust people placed in law enforcement. Marcus nodded calmly. "I appreciate that. I always try to follow traffic rules and keep myself and others safe," he said. His calm demeanor was disarming, but it also highlighted the officer's mistake without any accusation. It was a lesson in civility, patience, and professionalism all at once. As Reed stood there, the traffic around them continued as usual. Other drivers passed by, unaware of the tension unfolding on the side of the road. But for the two men, the moment felt heavier than the ordinary traffic stop it had started as. Marcus's calm authority contrasted sharply with the officer's anxious energy, and Reed could not ignore it. Marcus decided to make the situation as smooth as possible. He knew that escalating it would not help anyone, and he wanted to teach, not punish. "Officer, if you need to issue a warning or take notes, I am happy to comply," he said, his tone neutral. He did not want to embarrass the officer, but he also wanted to make it clear that he was aware of the situation and would not tolerate bias or aggression. Reed nodded, swallowing nervously. He reached for his notebook, hands slightly shaking. He had pulled over many drivers before, but never someone like this. His thoughts raced. What if this goes public? What if the judge files a complaint? The fear of consequences mixed with shame over his initial assumptions. Finally, Reed managed to speak clearly. I just want to make sure everything is in order." "I appreciate your cooperation," he said. There was no authority in his voice anymore, only a hint of apology and nervousness. Marcus nodded, understanding the situation perfectly. He kept his composure, maintaining the dignity that had earned him respect in his career. The two men stood there for a moment, the air thick with tension, but also with a silent lesson being taught. Marcus, through his calm presence, showed that respect, patience, and composure could turn even a potentially negative situation into an opportunity for reflection and learning. Reed, on the other hand, was beginning to understand the weight of his actions and the importance of treating everyone with fairness, regardless of personal bias. As Marcus finally prepared to drive away, he gave a polite nod. "Thank you, officer. I will continue on my way carefully," he said. Reed watched as the car merged back into traffic, the moment leaving a lasting impression on him. He knew he would remember this stop for the rest of his career, the day he learned that assumptions and bias could have serious consequences, and that true authority often comes with calmness and dignity rather than aggression. As Marcus drove on, he continued thinking about his day, the cases ahead, and the families depending on justice. He did not dwell on the traffic stop for long. He focused on what mattered. But for Officer Reed, the experience lingered. The nervousness, the surprise, and the subtle lesson about fairness and respect would stay with him for a long time. It was a morning that started like any other but ended with a powerful reminder of the responsibility that comes with authority and the importance of treating every person with respect. The city continued its morning rhythm around them, unaware of the quiet but meaningful encounter on the side of the road. And in that ordinary moment, both men, one learning humility, the other continuing his path of service, experienced a story that would be remembered long after the day ended. After the brief traffic stop, Judge Marcus Williams continued driving toward the courthouse. His mind was calm, but he could not help thinking about the moment he had just experienced. He had seen many situations in his life where people let assumptions guide their actions, and today had been no different. Yet he knew that moments like these, when handled correctly, could teach valuable lessons without escalating into conflict. Marcus parked his car in the courthouse lot, a place where he had spent countless hours in service of justice. The building was grand but welcoming, with tall columns and clean lines that gave a sense of order and stability. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paper, a reminder of the work that had been done there over decades. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Reed returned to his patrol car, still feeling the weight of what had just happened. He sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His mind replayed the encounter over and over. At first, he had approached it as a routine traffic stop, confident in his authority and certain of the assumptions he carried. But in a few minutes, everything had changed. The reality that he had just pulled over a federal judge, and a black judge at that, filled him with a strange mix of fear, embarrassment, and regret. He had always considered himself fair and professional, but he knew deep down that bias had influenced his actions. Now the truth was staring him in the face. The calm, polite, and authoritative presence of Judge Williams had exposed his mistake in a way that words alone could not. Back in the courthouse, Marcus was already reviewing his schedule for the day. He had a courtroom session in less than an hour, with lawyers, witnesses, and citizens waiting for him to preside over an important hearing. Even though the traffic stop had been a minor disruption in his day, it reminded him of the importance of patience and the careful exercise of authority. He thought about how he had handled the officer with respect, yet remained firm in protecting his dignity. As the day progressed, Marcus's reputation quietly preceded him. Many people knew him as a judge who treated everyone fairly, regardless of their status, race, or background. That reputation had been built over years of careful judgment, empathy, and professionalism. Today he had once again shown that authority could be exercised with calmness, teaching lessons without creating hostility. Meanwhile, Officer Reed could not focus on his usual tasks. Every time he stopped at a red light or observed another driver, he found himself reflecting on the morning's events. The memory of Marcus's calm voice, the polite way he had handed over his documents, and the quiet confidence in his eyes kept appearing in Reed's mind. It was a humbling experience, one that reminded him that every person deserved respect and that authority came with responsibility. By mid-morning, the story of the traffic stop had started to circulate quietly among the local police department. A few officers had noticed the unusual nature of the stop and had started asking questions. Reed avoided sharing too many details, but the tension in his voice was clear to anyone who listened. Even his colleagues could sense that something significant had happened, something that had shaken him more than a simple traffic stop ever should. At the same time, Marcus was in his courtroom preparing for a hearing. The session involved a civil rights case, one that dealt with discrimination and fairness in the workplace. As he walked into the courtroom, he felt a quiet determination to be fair, patient, and careful. He knew that the people in his courtroom were looking not just for judgment but for guidance, clarity, and justice. When the hearing began, Marcus listened carefully to every word. He asked questions politely, gave everyone a chance to speak, and ensured that the discussion remained focused on the facts. He was known for his ability to remain calm even in tense situations, and today was no exception. His mind occasionally wandered back to the morning encounter, not with anger but with a sense of reflection. He understood that sometimes people made mistakes, but the true test of character was how those mistakes were addressed and corrected. Meanwhile, Officer Reed finally returned to the station. He parked his car and sat quietly for a few minutes, trying to organize his thoughts. He knew that he could not ignore what had happened, nor could he pretend it had not affected him. The encounter had been a wake-up call, a moment that forced him to confront his assumptions and biases directly. He realized that he had an opportunity to grow, to become a better officer, and to treat every individual with fairness and dignity. Reed decided to write a report of the traffic stop, carefully noting the events without exaggeration. He described Marcus Williams as calm, professional, and respectful. While writing, he reflected on how different the interaction could have been if he had allowed frustration and bias to dictate his actions. The thought of potential consequences, from complaints to public scrutiny, reminded him that authority was not a privilege to be abused. It was a responsibility to be honored. Outside the courthouse, Marcus finished his day feeling accomplished. The hearing had gone smoothly, with both sides presenting their arguments clearly and respectfully. He felt satisfied that justice had been served and that the individuals involved had been heard. On his drive home, he reflected briefly on the morning traffic stop. It was a small event, but it had reminded him that patience, calmness, and professionalism were powerful tools, not just in the courtroom, but in every interaction of life. By the evening, Officer Reed's reflection had deepened. He talked quietly with a senior officer he trusted, admitting that he had acted on bias during the stop. The senior officer listened and nodded, acknowledging the courage it took to admit a mistake. He encouraged Reed to undergo further training and to think carefully about how he approached every citizen moving forward. Reed felt a weight lift slightly from his shoulders, knowing that acknowledging the error was the first step toward becoming a better officer. That night, Marcus Williams returned home to his family. He spent a few minutes talking with his children, sharing stories about the day in a way that highlighted the importance of calmness, patience, and integrity. He did not mention the traffic stop in detail, but emphasized lessons about respect, fairness, and the value of treating every person with dignity. His children listened attentively, absorbing not only the lessons from the courtroom but also the quiet wisdom that guided their father in everyday life. Officer Reed, on the other hand, spent a sleepless night thinking about the traffic stop, every moment replayed in his mind. The calm authority of the judge, the unexpected power of patience, and the potential consequences of assumptions. He made a personal promise to himself. Never again would he allow bias or frustration to guide his actions. He understood that one encounter could change not only his perspective, but also the way he conducted his professional life. By the next morning, the city was bustling as usual. Marcus Williams returned to the courthouse prepared for a day of hearings and cases. The events of the previous day had not distracted him, but they had reinforced his belief that every interaction mattered. Every action, every word, and every choice carried weight, and he carried that responsibility with quiet dignity. Officer Reed reported to duty again, determined to apply the lessons he had learned. He approached each car with renewed patience, each driver with respect, and each stop with professionalism. The encounter with Judge Williams had left a lasting impression, a reminder that authority must be tempered with fairness, humility, and the awareness that every person deserves respect, no matter their background or status. As the day ended, both men had reflected deeply on the events. Marcus Williams had once again shown that calm authority could teach lessons more powerfully than confrontation. Officer Reed had learned that humility and reflection were essential for growth. The traffic stop had been a brief moment, almost ordinary, yet it had created ripples that extended far beyond the side of the road. The city itself moved on, unaware of the quiet but profound exchange that had taken place. Yet, for these two men, the morning encounter had already changed them. One had reminded the world of the power of patience and integrity. The other had learned a lesson in humility and fairness that would guide him for years to come. It was a day that started like any other, but ended with lessons that neither man would ever forget. The encounter was brief, but it had the power to shape decisions, perspectives, and actions in ways that would continue to unfold over time. And so the story of the traffic stop became more than just a small event. It became a reminder of the importance of dignity, fairness, and respect in every corner of life. The day after the traffic stop, Officer Daniel Reed felt a weight pressing on his mind like he had never experienced before. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the calm face of Judge Marcus Williams, the confident way he had handed over his license, and the quiet authority that had left Reed feeling small and exposed. For the first time in years, Reed questioned not just his actions, but the very way he approached his work. He arrived early at the station, hoping to get ahead of his paperwork. But as he sat at his desk, his thoughts wandered back to the encounter. He remembered how quickly he had assumed things about Marcus based on his appearance and the car he was driving. That split-second judgment had almost led him to act in a way he knew, deep down, was unfair. Reed's mind replayed the moment over and over. The sharpness in his own voice, the nervous stammer, and most importantly, the polite but firm demeanor of the judge. He decided he needed advice. Reed walked to the office of Captain Hernandez, a senior officer he respected deeply. Hernandez had been on the force for over 20 years and had earned a reputation for fairness and wisdom. Reed explained the incident carefully, without exaggeration, admitting that he had allowed personal bias to influence his behavior. Hernandez listened quietly, nodding slowly as Reed spoke. "You did something that could have had serious consequences," Hernandez said calmly, "but the fact that you're admitting it and reflecting on it means you still have a chance to grow. Not everyone does." Reed felt a small wave of relief mixed with shame. He had expected anger or criticism, but instead, he found understanding and guidance. Hernandez continued, "The important thing is to learn from this. Think about how you approach every stop, every interaction. Authority is a responsibility, not a privilege. People notice how you treat them, even if they never say anything. And when bias influences your actions, it can have long-term effects, not just on others, but on you too." Reed nodded slowly. He knew his captain was right. He had been so confident in his authority for years that he had stopped reflecting on the human side of policing. That morning with Judge Williams had reminded him that every person deserved respect and fairness. It was not just about following the law. It was about how one treated people while enforcing it. Meanwhile, Judge Williams continued his day at the courthouse. He had barely thought about the traffic stop since leaving it behind, focusing instead on his cases. But his calm handling of the situation had already begun to ripple beyond that brief encounter. Colleagues who had seen the morning news or heard whispers about the incident admired the judge for his poise and professionalism. To them, Marcus had once again shown the power of composure and dignity, even in unexpected situations. Back at the station, Reed decided he could not simply move on without taking action. He began reviewing his own behavior during traffic stops over the past months. He realized there were patterns, times when impatience or frustration had influenced how he treated drivers. He recognized that small biases had crept into his judgment without his conscious awareness. It was an uncomfortable truth, but acknowledging it was the first step toward improvement. To address this, Reed signed up for a training program on bias awareness and community relations. He felt nervous but determined. He wanted to be a better officer, one who served the community fairly and without prejudice. The encounter with Marcus had been a wake-up call, a moment of humility that forced him to reconsider his role and responsibility. At the courthouse, Marcus had another day filled with hearings and consultations. One case involved a dispute between two local businesses. Marcus listened carefully to each side, asking questions that were fair and insightful. He reminded the parties of the importance of honesty and respect. Throughout the day, he displayed the same calm authority that had left Reed so unsettled. Marcus understood that influence came not from force or intimidation, but from consistency, fairness, and integrity. In the afternoon, Reed returned to his patrol car for a routine drive through the city. But this time he approached his duties differently. He reminded himself before each stop to treat every driver as a human being, not as a stereotype or a potential problem. Each interaction became a chance to practice respect and patience. When he stopped another driver for speeding, he spoke politely, explained the rules, and thanked the person for their cooperation. The difference in response was immediate. People were more willing to listen and cooperate, and Reed felt a sense of calm that had been missing from his work for years. Meanwhile, Marcus spent part of his evening mentoring young lawyers. He emphasized the importance of patience, integrity, and professionalism, telling stories of real-life situations without naming names. One story involved a challenging encounter with someone in a position of authority, where he had remained calm and respectful despite provocation. The young lawyers listened intently, recognizing the lessons embedded in his words. Marcus wanted them to understand that leadership and fairness were demonstrated not in moments of power, but in moments of restraint and clarity. Officer Reed, at home that night, reflected again on the lessons he had learned. He wrote in his journal describing the encounter with Marcus in detail. He admitted the assumptions he had made, the panic he had felt, and the embarrassment that followed. But he also wrote about the clarity he had gained, the importance of humility, and the resolve to act differently moving forward. Writing allowed him to process the experience fully and reinforced his commitment to being a fair and responsible officer. The next day, Reed felt more confident in his ability to handle difficult situations. He still remembered the traffic stop vividly, but instead of fear and regret, he now felt determination. He knew that accountability and self-reflection were ongoing processes, and that every encounter offered a chance to practice fairness, respect, and patience. The lesson from Marcus Williams had become a guide for his professional and personal growth. At the courthouse, Marcus handled another series of hearings. The day was busy, with lawyers presenting evidence and witnesses providing testimony. Marcus remained composed, focusing on the facts, listening carefully, and asking thoughtful questions. His reputation for fairness and professionalism continued to strengthen, and his calm authority subtly influenced everyone in the room. People respected him not because of his position, but because of the integrity and fairness he consistently demonstrated. By the evening, Reed attended a departmental meeting where officers discussed recent experiences and challenges. He spoke cautiously about his own reflection on the traffic stop, sharing lessons about bias and professionalism. Some colleagues listened attentively, while others appeared skeptical, but Reed felt a sense of relief. By acknowledging his mistakes publicly, he had taken another step toward personal growth and accountability. At home that night, Marcus sat quietly, reading over documents for an upcoming case. He thought about how one brief encounter on the side of the road had highlighted broader lessons about human behavior, fairness, and respect. Even though he had not sought recognition, the story of the traffic stop had already begun to teach others. Marcus understood that the true power of authority came from guiding others with fairness and dignity, even when no one was watching. Officer Reed, meanwhile, continued his reflection. He began thinking about long-term changes he could make in his work: more active listening, more patience, and more awareness of personal bias. He realized that the morning with Marcus Williams had been a turning point, not just a lesson in humility, but a call to action. He committed himself to treating every person he encountered with fairness and dignity, no matter their background or status. The encounter had created a chain reaction. Marcus Williams' calm authority had not only affected Reed, but also influenced the way others perceived fairness and professionalism. Reed's reflection and commitment to change showed that one small moment, handled correctly, could inspire growth and self-awareness. Both men had learned something valuable. Marcus through demonstrating composure and integrity, Reed through recognizing and correcting his mistakes. The city continued its daily rhythm, unaware of the quiet lessons unfolding. Traffic moved along, people went about their routines, and life carried on. Yet for these two men, a single morning encounter had set the stage for lasting change. Marcus continued his work with dignity and fairness, quietly teaching by example, while Reed began the long journey of reflection, accountability, and professional growth. It was a story of humility, respect, and transformation. A brief traffic stop had become more than just an ordinary moment. It had become a lesson in integrity, patience, and the power of self-reflection. Both men, in their own ways, had been changed, one through the calm exercise of authority, the other through the humbling experience of recognizing personal bias. And the effects of that morning would continue to shape their actions, decisions, and understanding of responsibility for years to come. The weeks after the traffic stop were a turning point for Officer Daniel Reed. Every day on duty, he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned from Judge Marcus Williams. It was not always easy. Old habits die slowly, and Reed noticed that sometimes his first instincts, impatience, assumptions, and frustration, still tried to take over. But he was determined to act differently. He wanted every driver, every person to feel respected no matter their background or appearance. Reed began observing himself closely. During each traffic stop, he took a moment to breathe and check his attitude. He greeted drivers politely, explained the reason for the stop calmly, and listened carefully to their responses. Sometimes a simple "thank you for your cooperation" changed the tone of the interaction completely. Drivers were more relaxed, more willing to cooperate, and the atmosphere felt less tense. Reed felt the difference immediately, a sense of satisfaction that came from doing the right thing rather than asserting unnecessary authority. At the same time, Marcus Williams continued his work as a judge with the same quiet dignity that had made him respected for years. He had not sought recognition for the traffic stop, but it had started to make its way into discussions among colleagues and in the community. People admired how he had handled the situation, not with anger or confrontation, but with calm authority and respect. His actions reminded everyone that fairness and patience often speak louder than power or force. Marcus also used the experience as an example in his mentorship sessions with young lawyers and law students. He explained the importance of professionalism, integrity, and patience, and how those qualities could influence others without ever raising one's voice. Leadership is shown not by forcing people to follow you, he would say, but by setting an example they respect and want to emulate. His students listened carefully, understanding that the lessons were not just about law, but about life and human interaction. Officer Reed, meanwhile, began to see the changes in himself more clearly. One day, he stopped a young driver for a minor traffic violation. Normally, Reed might have been irritated or brusque, but this time he greeted the driver politely and explained the situation calmly. The young driver apologized immediately, and they ended the interaction with a handshake and a smile. Reed felt a sense of pride and relief. This small act, guided by patience and respect, had created a positive interaction rather than tension. Word of Reed's change began to spread quietly among his colleagues. Some noticed that he was more thoughtful, more patient, and more careful in his interactions with the public. A few officers approached him privately, curious about what had caused the shift. Reed spoke cautiously, mentioning the lessons he had learned about humility, reflection, and fairness. He did not name Judge Williams at first, but the impact of his story was clear. Personal growth and reflection were powerful tools for anyone in authority. Marcus, during this time, continued to preside over important cases. One case involved a community dispute over land use. Both sides were passionate and emotions ran high. Marcus listened to every detail, asked questions patiently, and ensured that each person felt heard. His calm and measured approach helped de-escalate tension in the courtroom. People began to realize that true authority was not about dominance or control, but about fairness, listening, and guiding people toward understanding. In his personal life, Marcus also emphasized the importance of these lessons to his family. He spoke with his children about fairness, empathy, and the responsibility that comes with influence. He wanted them to understand that every action, even small ones, could have a lasting effect on others. His words were simple but powerful, shaping the way his children viewed authority, respect, and human interaction. Back at the police station, Reed began attending the bias awareness and professional development programs he had signed up for. Each session gave him tools to recognize and manage his own assumptions. He learned strategies to communicate more effectively, reduce tension during stops, and reflect before reacting. The training reinforced what he had learned from his encounter with Marcus, showing that change was possible with conscious effort and dedication. One afternoon, Reed found himself responding to a call involving a minor accident. Two drivers were arguing loudly, and the situation could have escalated quickly. Reed took a deep breath and approached calmly, using a soft tone and careful words to mediate the disagreement. Within minutes, he had helped the drivers communicate clearly and reach an understanding. Both drivers expressed gratitude for his patience and professionalism. Reed realized that every interaction was an opportunity to demonstrate fairness and respect, not just enforce rules. Meanwhile, Marcus handled a series of hearings related to employment disputes. He reminded all parties of the importance of fairness, honesty, and patience, guiding discussions with clarity and impartiality. His reputation for calm authority continued to grow, and more people began to view him as a role model not just in law, but in life. The lessons from the traffic stop had subtly reinforced the principles he had always lived by, showing that patience and composure could influence even those in positions of authority. Reed also began speaking to his fellow officers more openly about the importance of humility and reflection. He shared how a single encounter had taught him lessons about bias, patience, and professionalism. Some officers listened attentively while others were skeptical, but Reed continued, determined to lead by example. He wanted to demonstrate that even small changes in attitude and behavior could have a ripple effect, improving interactions with the community and fostering trust. At home, Marcus reflected on the broader meaning of the morning encounter weeks earlier. He understood that respect and fairness were not just ideals, they were practical tools that guided every interaction. His calm approach had not only diffused a potentially tense situation, but it also influenced someone else's behavior in a positive way. He saw the subtle ways in which authority, patience, and integrity could create meaningful change in the lives of others. Reed, for his part, continued to apply these lessons daily. Every traffic stop, every interaction was an opportunity to practice fairness and respect. He noticed that when he treated people with patience and understanding, tension dissolved quickly. He also realized that humility did not make him weaker. It made him stronger and more effective in his role. The experience with Marcus Williams had reshaped his approach to policing, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose in his work. Over time, the story of the traffic stop and its lessons quietly influenced both men's communities. Marcus's example in the courtroom inspired young lawyers, students, and citizens to act with fairness and integrity. Reed's transformation on the streets helped rebuild trust between law enforcement and the public, showing that reflection, humility, and patience could improve relationships and outcomes. One evening, Marcus attended a community event where he spoke about leadership, fairness, and the importance of treating everyone with respect. He did not mention the traffic stop specifically, but the message was clear. He emphasized that authority was not about asserting power, but about guiding others through example, patience, and integrity. The audience listened attentively, absorbing the wisdom of a man who had demonstrated these values in both large and small moments. Officer Reed, on the same evening, reflected on a particularly challenging stop during his shift. He had approached a tense situation with patience, speaking calmly and listening carefully. By the end of the interaction, the driver was cooperative and appreciative. Reed realized that his actions were creating a small but meaningful ripple in the community. The lessons from Marcus Williams had become a part of who he was as a professional and as a person. As weeks turned into months, the impact of that brief encounter continued to unfold. Marcus Williams maintained his calm authority in every courtroom and mentorship session. His approach inspired others to follow suit, proving that respect and fairness could have far-reaching effects. Officer Reed continued his journey of reflection and improvement, applying the lessons daily and encouraging others to do the same. The city, bustling with activity and life, seemed unchanged on the surface. But for these two men, a simple morning encounter had grown into something far more significant. It had become a story of humility, reflection, and growth. One man had reminded the world of the power of calm authority, while the other had learned that true strength came from fairness, patience, and self-awareness. In small ways, the lessons continued to spread. Reed's fellow officers observed his improved approach and slowly began to adopt some of the same techniques. Marcus's mentorship sessions and courtroom presence continued to inspire respect, patience, and integrity. The ripple effect of one morning traffic stop showed that even ordinary moments could have extraordinary consequences when handled with thoughtfulness and care. The story of the encounter between a judge and an officer had become more than a single event. It was a reminder of the power of humility, reflection, and respect. Marcus Williams and Daniel Reed had both been changed by the experience, each in his own way. One through quiet, calm authority, the other through honest self-reflection and a commitment to improvement. And the lessons learned that morning continued to influence lives. The months following the traffic stop had changed both men in ways they had not anticipated. Officer Daniel Reed had grown more thoughtful, patient, and aware of his own behavior. Judge Marcus Williams continued to inspire others through his calm authority, fairness, and integrity. What had started as a brief, ordinary event on the side of the road had now become a lasting lesson in humility, respect, and responsibility. Reed began each day at the station with a new mindset. He reminded himself before every shift that authority was a responsibility, not a privilege. Every interaction, no matter how small, was an opportunity to demonstrate fairness and respect. He had learned that patience was more effective than aggression, and understanding was more powerful than judgment. This new approach was not always easy, but he committed himself fully, knowing that change required conscious effort. One morning, Reed was dispatched to a community outreach event where local police officers interacted with residents to build trust and understanding. Reed was nervous at first, wondering if he would remember all the lessons he had learned. But as he engaged with families, listened to their concerns, and explained safety procedures calmly and respectfully, he realized how much he had grown. People smiled, thanked him, and even shared stories of their own experiences with law enforcement. Reed felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He was seeing firsthand how patience, respect, and humility could build bridges in the community. Meanwhile, Judge Williams had continued to serve the city with the same quiet dignity he always had. He presided over several challenging cases, including disputes involving civil rights, workplace fairness, and local governance. In every case, Marcus listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and guided discussions with fairness and clarity. People in his courtroom respected him not only for his legal knowledge but also for the integrity and calm authority he displayed. Even small gestures, like a patient explanation of legal procedures to those unfamiliar with the system, left a lasting impression on everyone present. The traffic stop that had started it all became a quiet teaching story among Marcus's colleagues and mentees. He shared the experience without blame or anger, emphasizing how patience and professionalism could teach lessons more powerfully than confrontation or authority alone. Every interaction matters, he would say. Sometimes a single moment can change the way someone sees themselves and their responsibilities. His words resonated with those learning from him, demonstrating that leadership and influence were often exercised quietly, through example rather than force. Officer Reed continued to practice self-reflection daily. He kept a journal, noting both successes and moments where he felt he could have done better. The act of writing allowed him to analyze his actions and thoughts, ensuring that he stayed on the path of improvement. Reed noticed that his stress levels decreased when he approached every stop with patience and understanding. Tension dissolved more easily, and even challenging situations became manageable when he applied the lessons he had learned from the morning encounter with Marcus. One afternoon, Reed was called to assist at a local school event. A few teenagers had been involved in a minor misunderstanding, and the principal requested police presence to ensure safety. Reed approached the situation calmly, listening carefully to both sides. He asked thoughtful questions and encouraged the students to explain their perspective. By the end of the conversation, tensions had eased, and the teenagers felt understood rather than judged. Reed reflected on how far he had come. He realized that the lessons from Marcus Williams had taught him more than how to interact with drivers. They had shown him how to handle conflict, communicate effectively, and build trust. Marcus, during the same period, continued his mentorship work. He met regularly with law students, young lawyers, and community leaders, sharing his experiences and guiding them in the principles of fairness, patience, and integrity. He used stories from his career to illustrate key points, carefully emphasizing that real leadership required understanding, humility, and calmness under pressure. His guidance inspired many to reflect on their own behavior and the impact of their actions on others. Officer Reed's growth did not go unnoticed by his colleagues. Some officers who had been skeptical of his change began to see the benefits firsthand. Reed's calm approach to conflict resolution, patient communication, and thoughtful decision-making created better outcomes for both the public and law enforcement. Slowly, others began to adopt similar approaches. The department saw improved interactions with the community and a noticeable increase in public trust. Reed realized that even small changes in behavior could have a ripple effect, influencing not only individual interactions but the overall culture of the workplace. At home, Marcus continued to teach his children the same lessons he applied in his professional life. He spoke to them about respect, fairness, and the importance of listening carefully to others. He wanted them to understand that influence came from the way one treated people every day, not just from positions of power or authority. His children absorbed these lessons, seeing firsthand how patience and integrity shaped the way others responded to him and how he responded to them. Officer Reed's life also changed outside of work. He noticed that he approached personal relationships with more patience and empathy. He listened more attentively to family and friends, recognized his own assumptions, and made efforts to treat everyone fairly. The lessons from a single traffic stop had extended far beyond his professional life, transforming his perspective on human interaction and responsibility. One evening, Marcus attended a community panel on leadership and justice. He shared his experiences and emphasized the importance of integrity, patience, and fairness. Without directly naming the incident, he illustrated how small, everyday decisions could have a meaningful impact on others. The audience, which included students, community leaders, and young professionals, listened attentively, absorbing the lessons of respect and authority demonstrated through calm, principled action. Officer Reed, observing his own progress, began mentoring new officers at the station. He spoke openly about the importance of reflection, humility, and treating every person with dignity. He shared how one brief encounter with a judge had profoundly changed his perspective and inspired him to improve. Young officers listened carefully, appreciating his honesty and the practical lessons he had learned. Reed realized that teaching others reinforced his own growth and created a culture of professionalism and respect within the department. Months later, the story of the morning traffic stop quietly resurfaced in local discussions, not as a scandal or complaint, but as an example of how a brief encounter could create meaningful lessons for both parties. Marcus's calm authority had shown the power of patience, fairness, and professionalism. Reed's reflection and subsequent growth had shown that humility and self-awareness could lead to lasting change. The community saw a positive outcome, demonstrating that understanding and integrity could prevail in situations that initially seemed ordinary. Marcus continued his work in the courtroom, mentoring and community leadership with consistent patience and clarity. His example inspired others to approach their own interactions with respect and fairness. The lessons of calm authority, thoughtful communication, and integrity became embedded in the culture of those around him, demonstrating the ripple effect one individual could have on a wider community. Officer Reed, now a respected figure in the department, continued to embody the lessons he had learned. His colleagues, the public, and even the teenagers and families he had interacted with benefited from his growth. He understood that every action mattered, every choice could teach a lesson, and that humility and reflection were essential to being effective in any position of authority. The city itself continued its busy rhythm, unaware of the small but significant changes happening within its institutions. Yet for Marcus and Reed, the morning traffic stop had left a lasting mark. It had transformed a routine encounter into a story of humility, respect, growth, and positive influence. The judge had demonstrated how calm authority and fairness could guide behavior and inspire respect, while the officer had learned that reflection, accountability, and patience could transform not only his own actions, but also the broader culture around him. Years later, both men would remember that morning with clarity, not as a moment of conflict, but as a lesson in human dignity and responsibility. Marcus continued to serve with calm authority, mentoring countless young professionals and guiding the community with fairness and integrity. Reed continued to grow, applying the lessons he had learned to policing, community engagement, and his personal life. The experience remained a powerful reminder that even brief encounters could have profound effects when handled with thoughtfulness, humility, and respect. The story of that single traffic stop became more than just an incident. It became a testament to the power of patience, reflection, and ethical behavior. It showed that one person's calm composure could inspire change in another, and that humility and accountability could transform both professional practice and personal growth. Both men, in their own ways, had been changed for the better, and the lessons of that day continued to resonate, proving that integrity, respect,